Sylvanas' soul is now complete. She's on our side, guided through her trauma by Uther and ready to help us defeat her old master. So, what next then? Do we put Sylvanas on trial? Does Gen go absolutely furious and kill her? Or, well, any of the other many people that she's wronged? How do we deal with a character who has done so much evil, but under strange circumstances, and who now fights with us on our side? Well, the key here may just be in her deep past, and the love she harbored for a fellow ranger, the pupil that she got in bed with, Thanos. Or as I call him, Thanos Skillshare, today's sponsor, where we're going to learn about game development. And the first 1,000 of you to follow my link will get a month of Skillshare Premium for free, so you can just jump right in. Okay, Michael Moore wants to teach you programming and Unity. And let me tell you, as somebody who did hardcore and kinda boring custom engine programming in uni and paid thousands of pounds a year to do so, I will tell you that this is actually the way to learn, right? Hold yourself accountable, do the likes of Michael Moore's course. Plus, learning by doing is the best. It's how you get excited, right? And what better way to learn C# and learn all the Unity things than making a game in Unity? Plus, and this is a great thing, Michael's courses are all built on Unity 2020 and 2021. A whole bunch of new things, new features that weren't there when I first learned Unity. Now, these are the resources that didn't really exist when I or my friends were starting off, and believe me, if I could go back in time and swap my years at university for Michael Moore's courses and the like, I would do it. So take these, learn them, play around with them, do some game jams, meet local game developers at events. That's how to get in. These are great for beginners. They take you right through. They're awesome. He's got 2D, 3D, building an RPG. What an awesome in-depth resource. And you can get it on Skillshare, the online learning community for creators, today. So what better way to use the free month that you'll get if you follow my link below. So thanks to Michael, thanks to Skillshare, let's go. Before we talk about how love is going to basically save everything, Sylvanas' rap sheet is kind of extensive, owing to her extreme responses to just about everything in the post-soul sundering reality that she found herself in. Take the new plague of, say, vanilla. Physically destructive, totally evil, horrible, nasty stuff. But having the new plague was almost like a mutually assured destruction thing. It guaranteed the Forsaken's survival, You've got this super weapon, break glass in case of invasion. Blizzard even played with the new plague in BFA, showing it being essentially used in Horde soldiers. So, what was this new plague then? Was it Sylvanas just being really hardcore in times of war, using all the weapons she had? Or was it something a lot more sinister, to do with a funky fella with big nips stuck off in the Shadowlands? Now, of course, the real trouble begins with Teldrassil, where she obviously murdered thousands of innocent civilians, all intercut with flashbacks of Arthas slaughtering her people. It kind of feels a bit obvious and on the nose in retrospect, doesn't it? Look at the evil in her eyes as she holds Dalaran's face. And Teldrassil's a strange event, It's felt different in its various tellings. There's the cinematic where it very much seems like a big snap decision. Then there's her reliving her traumas of the past more recently, and the sort of that part of her justifying it as a part of the big plan. Then, of course, there's the novella, where, again, that scene just felt a bit different. And then, who knows how that scene is going to feel when it comes to Christie Golden's tackling of it in the new Sylvanas novel. And then, after Teldrassil, we've got the Fourth War proper, something framed as a response to Azerite, where initially we, the players, were really supposed to think that, this was the factions being at each other because this crazy new substance has appeared. But in reality, that whole war was just a scheme to cause as much death as was physically possible, Horde deaths included. And then that's also that she could help her boss end creation as we know it. Yet, as much as that stuff is cosmically evil, those are not acts that were perpetrated by the same Sylvanas that fell in love with Thanos all those years ago. The Sylvanas who did those things is the one that had suffered a sundered soul. Not literally splitting her into good or bad, but obviously impacting her deeply. That which carried on in the physical form was really influenced by her trauma, her suffering. So while she wasn't split into good and evil, it's abundantly clear that Ranger General Sylvanas really would not have done what Banshee Queen Sylvanas did. If the soul wasn't sundered, then I think extremely likely her response to her trauma would have been a lot different, potentially a lot more constructive. Again, to see a character who has also dealt with trauma, including some similar traumas, you need only look at the deeper history of Illyria, her sister. So really, if it wasn't for the soul shattering, Sylvel wouldn't have had anything to work with Sylvanas. And then that means, is justice possible? Whose fault is it really? And just what the hell are we going to do with Sylvanas? From a storytelling perspective, I think the important thing now is that players, well, heal from everything that has happened. Night Elves need a resolution at the scale of Night Elves as a people, not just Tyrande choosing renewal in a cutscene. Sylvanas loyalists were extremely betrayed by the literal story and also by how they weren't really treated with much respect or really care. People, there are people who thought they knew the character of Sylvanas, only to find out about the soul shattering and all of the jailer. They'll feel a little bit betrayed or a bit confused because their investment in this character ultimately was in somebody who was not who they thought she was, and who really wasn't operating under the motivations that they thought she was operating under. So how do we deal with this? Well, first up, redemption arc. Noble sacrifice, dedicating herself to service. These are all possible. Voice lines actually suggest that there won't be a Lich King again, and I doubt Sylvanas would really want that power given her consciousness. So chances are and we are just going to move on from the idea of needing a Lich King. Now, perhaps Sylvanas can serve the Shadowlands in some way, but it is hard to see how. The darker angle, obviously, is vengeance being Sylvanas' end. Tyrande committed herself to not pursuing vengeance, so I suppose that's her out. Chandris could make a run of it, but obviously that would involve her betraying Tyrande, which seems unlikely. Genn would love some vengeance. But how is he going to get his hands on Sylvanas? Will Sylvanas be locked up? How would that even work? Would Alliance and Horde have timeshares of her? Well, I think there's actually two options here. I think those options can weave into each other and provide us with a pretty damn satisfying resolution to Sylvanas, and one that gives us some future plot and drama, and that makes perfect sense for the character of Sylvanas, not just as we know her now, but also as we knew her in the past. For her next chapter to begin, her current one must close, and in closing it, Blizzard must try their absolute hardest to explain her motivations in the fullest. With details, like actual details, not just generic hand-waving and big, grand statements that don't really mean anything, like how they've handled Sylvel. And this can't be left to the novel. So if Blizzard nail her trial in-game, maybe in patch 9.2.5, then the stage can be set for her future. And I think two men are essential to this story, Thanos and Anduin. Anduin fought for her. Anduin really did try to convince her, even through all of the hatreds he will have borne from the Fourth War. He really made a strong effort, and he was pretty damn successful, as we saw in those Shadowlands cutscenes. It was Anduin who sowed the seed of Sylvanas' betrayal and return to our side. Now, Sylvanas, of course, also helps to set Anduin free. If Sylvanas didn't work for us, or with us, then there's no way that in the new raid we would have been able to save Anduin and eventually defeat Zovaal. Of course, both of the characters that I mentioned are Zovaal's victims. Anduin and Sylvanas, they've had an awful time. So if anyone is to show Sylvanas empathy, I mean, one person is obviously Uther, and another one would, of course, be Anduin. I think that makes sense. It is within Anduin's character. The thing, though, is Anduin isn't just a guy, he's also a king. And we need to think about his people, because while Anduin may empathize with Sylvanas and perhaps begin to understand what happened, while almost everyone else, especially those people left in Azeroth, they probably won't. So whatever faction gets Sylvanas will probably have their own populace wanting her head. And they'll have the other faction's population also wanting her head, perhaps wondering, why haven't the Alliance executed Sylvanas, the great betrayer? So if any major faction character is to take her in, I think Anduin is probably a perfect candidate, and this would be sensible enough for the plot. You see, Blizzard have long teased future Alliance divisions, and we have talked about that so much on the channel, all the different ways it could happen. But Anduin's empathy towards Sylvanas is a way for us to have that future Alliance tension in a way that directly stems from the plotline of this expansion, because Tyrande may, in her arc, choose renewal instead of vengeance. Anduin, it's in his nature to see the best in people, to have empathy, so he will choose renewal. But what of everyone else? What of Genn? Sylvanas killed his son. Justice and vengeance have really been core parts of this franchise for a long, long time indeed. We've grappled with it in Shadowlands, we're going to grapple with it in the future. I mean, one of the first things we ever heard Uther say was, vengeance cannot be a part of what we do. If we allow our passions to turn to bloodlust, then we become as vile as the orcs. Now, this theme is being sort of thrust over to its limits. And it's both the player base, and the cast of this story who are being tested in this question of justice and vengeance. Now, love and belonging are core things to Sylvanas. Her struggle with these things has actually led her down much of this path, and love is what's going to guide her future. Before patch 9.2's data mining, we all suspected that Sylvanas would perhaps, die in the end, but have a final redemptive act, a bit like a Darth Vader. Many other people thought that maybe she would become a Lich Queen for good, or perhaps sacrifice her soul for the Arbiter. Well, Pelagos is the Arbiter, and there's even a voice line floating around referencing there not really ever being another Lich King. Now, Anduin, being the key to her future, I think makes sense. I think it's probably going to happen, but you might be wondering, what else? What more? Is there not a massive Nathano-sized hole? Well, check out this voice line. I found you before, my love. I will find you again, no matter how long it takes. Now, this is where it starts to actually get interesting. So, are Sylvanas and Thanos lovers? Yes. It's just felt a bit strange and exploitative recently, with Nathanos, essentially being her lapdog, and Sylvanas really treating him like a bit of a tool, an accessory. Look back at the older lore, though, and they've almost certainly done a big shag, or several. You see, before Silvermoon was sacked, she would regularly visit his house for debriefings, officially, in the military sense of the word. And in reality, well, debriefing. Nathanos, of course, died, and he was risen as this horrible, rotting mess. But of course in Legion, well, I think it was just before Legion, Sylvanas basically sacrificed the body of his cousin to make him a big sexy beast man, the one we know today. Now, messed up, soul-sundered Sylvanas still seems to have had this longing for him, this connection to him, even if maybe she rationalized it as securing a vital ally and having someone she'll always trust. But there's always been that little kernel of longing, and Sylvanas has always struggled with her emotional needs. That's actually been a large part of why people really liked the character. Obviously, as evidenced by things such as turning her lover into basically her personal Mike Ehrmantraut-style fixer in Thanos. Other key highlights include that time she tried to reconnect with her sister by, plotting to murder her, I believe, via poison, and then resurrect her so they could rule together. That was in the Before the Storm novel, if you didn't know, by the way. Yeah, Sylvanas actually really does crave for love and for connection. She just really could not deal with it, though. So I think it's rather telling that, soul reformed, she speaks of Thanos in terms of their love. Now, we of course know that Thanos has been taken by the jailer, right? If you're not super up to date in that, basically Tyrande in the 9.1 cinematic taunts Sylvanas about like, hey, you know the jailer's got your boyfriend, right? And it turned out Sylvanas had no idea that Thanos was even in the Shadowlands. Of course, Zovaal is basically holding his soul, I imagine, for some sort of leverage. So, perhaps Sylvanas' future involves Thanos. I mean, almost certainly. Perhaps Zovaal spitefully threw Thanos' soul away. Maybe he hides it. Maybe he sunders it. Maybe she has to pick up the pieces, find him. I mean, she did say, quote, "I will find you no matter how long it takes." This implies that Thanos is missing and that she has a new purpose. It implies that Thanos and the search for him will be the key to her future. Now, with all the evil that Thanos has wrought, potentially with not even as good of a mitigating factor as Sylvanas', I mean, how could these characters grow? How will he respond seeing his lover restored but now traumatized and having this strange experience of, a bit of the old Sylvanas is back, but he's still Thanos. And he's done all the things he's done, maybe for his own rationalization, in some sort of, the name of love. Well, let's think about things from Thanos' point of view for a second. We kill him in the pre-patch. Maybe he's going to feel betrayed by Sylvanas, who knows? But either way, we know that the Arbiter is offline, we know that his soul goes to Zovaal, and that Zovaal keeps his soul. Now, assuming he still has some degree of sentience or consciousness, whatever, then at this point, Thanos will have realized what's really going on, that this big death fella is in fact not good news. Perhaps he will have thought that, oh dear, Sylvanas has abandoned me, she's actually working for this big evil person who's now tormenting me. But if Thanos is as loyal as he generally is shown to be, he'll likely blame Zovaal. He'll likely think they are both victims of his manipulation, all allowed for by their suffering at the hands of Arthas, which of course was all Zovaal's fault. So, by the time that anybody actually sees Thanos, he could even be partway through his own rehabilitation. Maybe he'll be thinking through these problems himself. And perhaps he'll know full well that he and Sylvanas were in the wrong. As far as futures for Sylvanas go, I think this one with Thanos could be the most satisfying. And bear in mind, this is coming from the perspective of me. Someone who notably has found Thanos to be extremely annoying lately, in BFA, and who has not really liked the direction of these characters since Legion. I actually think that this would be a satisfying enough way to take them, probably the best you could get out of Shadowlands. And this could even weave in with Anduin. Imagine him trying to help her. The wider alliance catching wind of this, sparking a multi-faction political drama, both internal to the alliance and external. Only for Sylvanas to perhaps realize that as much as she might be on her own personal journey of growth, maybe she's going to realize that, but I still did what I did. Azeroth cannot move past the awful things that I've done, and therefore, I'm the problem. I have to go. So maybe Sylvanas will put herself into exile, and that the story of her exile will be to find the love that Zovaal stole from her. Not just recently, by taking Thanos' soul, but, well, by how, if it was not for the jailer, Arthas wouldn't have happened, she wouldn't have died, Thanos would not have died, and perhaps they actually would have lived happily ever after. So, no doubt, she'll have a lot of guilt then for how she treated Thanos. I'm sure that Ranger General Sylvanas and the merging of Banshee and Ranger General that we now really see as Sylvanas now, she's probably going to look at how she treated Thanos and think, oh, wow, I was a bit nasty to him, I was pretty short, I was pretty cold, I took him for granted, and I actually used his loyalty for me to twist him into a worse person. Now that said, Thanos could just be a bit of a prick. You see, Lorthamar didn't actually like Thanos that much in life, thinking him to be a thuggish bully. But Lorthamar also wanted to debrief Sylvanas, so perhaps he was just jealous. And with that, thank you for watching. If you'd like to support us a little bit more and check out the great stuff in Skillshare, today's sponsor, you can check that out down below. But that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.